He strolled into the all-hands meeting like he'd just snorted a line of synergy off a TED talk. Black skull print sneakers, blood orange blazer with a graphic tee that said revenue is a mindset, and a grin so wide it looked medically concerning. I'm not here to change things, he said, pacing like a preacher on Adderall. I'm here to evolve this place. Everyone clapped. Not because we believed him, because that's what scared people do when the power shifts. You clap, you nod, you hope the axe swings past your neck. By the third sentence, I knew we were screwed. Not like Q4's looking rough screwed. I mean corporate soulectomy by a Silicon Valley sociopath in progress. His name was technically Jared, but by lunch he was already new freaky CEO in Slack channels, whispered in break rooms like Voldemort with a venture fund. Been at this company 13 years. VP of Compliance. Not glamorous, not sexy, but I was the reason our house of cards hadn't been inspected by federal agents with clipboards and bad coffee breath. Now I was watching this man, who referred to HR as the Vibe Patrol, pull respected department heads into glass offices for 5-minute realignment conversations that always ended with them not returning from lunch. By day 2, he'd fired our controller, insulted the diversity lead on camera, and told the entire UX team that empathy is a growth bottleneck. And still, folks laughed at his jokes like their 401 KS depended on it. Because maybe they did. Listen, I'm not trying to turn this into some dramatic YouTube docuseries, but 97% of you are listening to this kind of story without subscribing. I get it. We're all busy trying not to get laid off by dudes in designer hoodies. But if you've made it this far, I'm begging you, tap that subscribe button and help me hit 10,000 for the first time in my life. I need a win, damn it, back to Freaky. The first staff-wide fireside chat was held in the cafeteria, lights dimmed like he was doing stand-up in a speakeasy. He opened with, titles are illusions. I'm not your boss, I'm your disruptor-in-chief. And he pointed to our 62-year-old VP of engineering and said, no offense, but some of you are too legacy to lead where we're going. Some laughed, some didn't. I smiled, tight, calculated, the way women in power do when they're being silently tested for extinction. He kept going. He talked about replacing quarterly reports with vibes-based forecasting. He said our clients don't want compliance, they want confidence. And he looked directly at me when he said it, holding the pause just long enough to make my skin try to leave my body. I went home that night and deleted nothing from my desktop. Instead, I made a folder, named it Arcadia Fallout, password protected, offline backup. Then I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and opened a blank Word doc because I've seen men like him before. And this time, I wasn't just documenting the crash. I was gonna light the fuse myself. First thing he killed was the conflict of interest audit. Said it was too retro, like ethics were just a passing TikTok trend. No review, no meeting. Just a Slack message at 11:03 p.m. that read, compliance slows innovation. Let's not trip over red tape on our way to the moon rocket winking. He actually used the rocket emoji. And the wink. The man was running a $300 million tech firm like it was his Instagram story. Next came the DEI metrics. No one wants to be reduced to an acronym, he said in a staff meeting, sipping from a reusable bottle that said hustle is holy. Then, without blinking, he rolled the entire department under culture and vibes. I wish I were joking. My team, what was left of it, looked at me like I could stop this. Like I was still the adult in the room. But Freaky was moving fast, and fast is poison in corporate systems. You don't have time to organize. You barely have time to notice you're bleeding before the limb is gone. Then came the Wednesday morning operations meeting. 8 of us around a conference table that used to feel solid. Now it felt like a stage for public executions. Freaky sat at the head, legs crossed, fiddling with a fidget cube like a toddler in a boardroom. We're sunsetting whistleblower retention, he said. No more anonymous feedback portals. If someone's got a problem, they can look me in the eye like a grown-up. I raised my hand. That violates 3 federal protections. And our own internal, he cut me off with a grin that should have been cited for workplace toxicity. Come on, he chuckled, we don't need the HR police anymore. You're still stuck in compliance kindergarten. This is grown-up land now. Laughter. Real and nervous. I watched a junior exec slap the table like he was auditioning for Stockholm Syndrome. The musical? And that's when I felt it. The shift, not fear, not even anger. Resolve. That night, I reopened the Arcadia Fallout folder. Created a new subfile, Direct Violations Q1. Started logging, deleted audits department mergers without documentation, a suspicious wire transfer labeled Investor Harmonization Fee Nothing Sexy. Nothing headline grabbing, just foundation rot, the kind that topples empires when you tug the right beam. I started recording Zoom meetings, storing voicemails, archiving Slack threads. He was reckless but not stupid. He knew what he was doing, and so did I. I called my old law school roommate, now deep inside the SEC, and casually asked how whistleblower protections worked post-termination. She laughed, paused, and said, why? Is something happening? Not yet, I said. The air smells like gasoline. And when gas is in the air, all it takes is one match. So I started sharpening mine. It started with the calendar. One day I was in 3 budget meetings, 2 hiring panels, and a compliance rollout for our EU partners. The next, crickets. My schedule dried up like a warning. Meetings were suddenly rescheduled. Threads I was tagged in disappeared. Every time I tried to join a strategy call, I got the spinning Zoom wheel of death followed by a polite, oops, wrong link. Then came the email from HR. Subject line, temporary role review. No salutation, just 2 sentences. As part of our restructuring alignment, your title is under evaluation. Please hold on any final decisions or escalations during this period. No time frame, no reason, no contact person, just digital fog. When I replied asking for clarification, got a bounce back, tried Slack, left on read, tried walking into their office locked. I was the VP of compliance. Now I was Schrodinger's employee, technically still on payroll but functionally ghosted. At lunch, a junior project manager I'd mentored avoided eye contact like I owed her rent. My own assistant whispered, "They're saying you're intense. Maybe not a team player, right? Intense. That's what they call women who won't giggle through corporate gaslighting." I went home, poured 2 fingers of whatever was left in the cabinet, and stared at my screen. Not blinking, not breathing. Then I created a new doc. Title, the iceberg file subtitle, What Jared Missed While Playing God. Inside, timelines of terminated audits, screenshots of falsified vendor approvals, discrepancies between actual revenue and reported quarterly growth, a Slack message where a middle manager literally asked, "Are we supposed to fake the client testimonial deck again?" All of it was timestamped. Neutral, cold, no adjectives, just data sharpened to a blade. I layered in federal codes, annotated policies, quoted SEC doctrine like it was scripture, and for every lie they tried to float, I stacked receipts like bricks. I didn't scream, didn't storm into offices demanding answers. That's what they expected, emotion, outburst, something to justify the whisper campaign. But I gave them silence, the kind that breathes behind locked doors and grows teeth. Friday afternoon, I got a Google Calendar invite labeled Career Alignment Chat 15 min. No sender, no context. I clicked maybe, then clicked back to my file and kept writing. Because when they start pretending you're invisible, that's when you become most dangerous. The betrayal came in khakis and a Patagonia vest. Craig, my old mentor, the man who used to walk me through contract language line by line, like a sensei of legal risk mitigation. He once told me, always assume the company will choose its survival over your integrity. Then decide if you can live with that. So when I asked to meet him off campus for a drink, I thought naively that I was calling in one last favor. One last ember of decency in a place already ash deep. We sat at a cheap bar 3 blocks from HQ. He ordered an Arnold Palmer like it was still 2014. I laid out just a slice of what I had, carefully, nothing damning, just enough to test the waters. Disappearing audits. The internal memo about adjusting revenue before the next round. Whispers about a lawsuit freaky CEO had paid to settle in Seattle. He nodded along, rubbed his chin, did the whole wise owl act. Then he leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "Just write it out. CEOs like this. Burn bright and fast. You don't want to be the match." I swallowed hard, smiled, paid the tab, and the next morning Freaky called me into his office. No assistant, no HR, just him leaning against the windowsill like he was posing for a Forbes article titled Billionaire by Disruption. He didn't even sit. "You know," he said, "when people start circulating hit lists, it poisons the water, undermines trust, momentum." He folded his arms, smirked. "You're not a team player, that's toxic now." I blinked once, just once. Felt my blood turn to frost, then heat, then settle into something altogether other. "I'm sorry," I said. "You're right. I've been overwhelmed, defensive. Maybe I'm not cut out for this new culture." He softened, thought he'd won. They always do when they hear a woman apologize. "I'll resign Friday," I added, quietly, no drama. He smiled like a man who just sold your grandmother's house and told you it was for your own good. I walked out, straight-faced. No tears. Then I locked my office door, opened my terminal, pulled up the backend to our internal knowledge base, opened the admin security dashboard. Buried inside a forgotten patch file, one I'd written 3 years ago when we first migrated to cloud, I added 5 lines of code. Kill switch installed. If they tried to alter or delete internal audits, whistleblower reports, or client fraud assessments, it would trigger a chain that duplicated the files and sent them to 3 off-site encrypted vaults, including one named in my private server, plausible deniability. Then I opened my iceberg file. I stripped it of emotion, added footnotes, legal citations, SEC language, clean, airtight, the kind of document that could be read in a courtroom without a single raised eyebrow. Named it Timeline of Known Violations and Misconduct Confidential. I scheduled it in my Proton mail. Set the send time, Friday, 11:59 a.m., 30 seconds before the all-hands meeting was scheduled to end. Recipient list, blind copy to every major investor, board member, regulatory contact, and 2 investigative journalists I knew from a past class action inquiry. Then I shut my laptop, smoothed my blazer, and walked back into the hall like I'd just accepted my fate. Despair is easy to fake when you're already numb. But underneath the act, I wasn't broken. I was arming the warhead. The The thing about staying quiet long enough is that people start forgetting you're in the room, and that's when they talk too loud. By Wednesday, I'd gone full Spectre. People stopped greeting me in the hallway. My presence made them nervous, like I was the HR version of a terminal diagnosis. Even Freaky passed me in the corridor without acknowledgement, which I counted as a win. Narcissists lose interest once they think you've accepted the role of background scenery. That same day, I reached out to Lily. Lily, former compliance associate, now a researcher at a firm that builds investor risk profiles for high net worth clients. Sharp, discreet, and still owed me one for helping her escape a prior NDA trap. We didn't talk over email. We didn't even talk over phone. I drove 2 towns over and handed her a USB drive in a Panner parking lot like we were in a Netflix pilot about suburban espionage. She messaged me 3 hours later. These projections are doctored. 4 of the investor reports you included are mathematically impossible. I asked her to be sure. She replied, sure as gravity, and you're not the only one sniffing. There's SEC chatter, quiet, preliminary. That one hit me in the lungs. I'd seen creative accounting before, but this was felonious. We weren't talking about spinning numbers, we were talking about manufacturing entire fake client contracts. And investors, they'd been dining on steak made of tofu and Photoshop. I needed verification, something internal, something personal. So I messaged Chloe. Chloe was nobody on paper, just a junior assistant to one of the board members. But she was smart, observant, and more importantly, over it. She'd once told me over happy hour that the company's culture was a TED talk wrapped in a frat party wearing fake eyelashes. So I made up a light-hearted pretext, offered to grab her a drink after work, and halfway through a shared hummus plate, I said, off the record, are people talking about the Seattle thing? Her face stiffened like a glitch. She didn't speak right away, just took a long sip of her drink and stared at the tabletop like it held absolution. Then, softly, she said, they're not just talking, they're burying. There's a whole subfolder of files marked internal use oversight drafts. They disappear when you refresh the server. Jared's using a private channel to bypass board documentation protocols. I nodded, tried to keep the hair on my arms from standing up. Chloe exhaled and added, they think it's going to blow eventually, but they're hoping it doesn't happen on their watch. Classic. The cowards were gambling the roof wouldn't collapse before their bonuses cleared. Back home, I updated the iceberg file, added screenshots, clarified language, inserted a section titled Known Suppression of Regulated Disclosures with footnotes, cross-references, just enough for anyone with a JD to smell the fire under the smoke. The final piece. I tested the kill switch, manually triggered a deletion scenario on a dummy account. The protocol worked. 3 vaults lit up green, then I stared at the clock, 42 hours and 12 minutes until detonation. Freaky was onstage rehearsing his town hall like a tech messiah, but I'd seen his gospel, and I was writing the final chapter. At 8:03 a.m., Thursday morning, my corporate obituary arrived. Access rights updated effective immediately. My Slack channels were grayed out. Admin dashboards locked, calendar blank. I couldn't even RSVP no to the all-hands invite I was still technically expected to attend. The company hadn't fired me, they'd amputated me. No announcement, no thank you, no coffee-stained goodbye sheet by the printer. Just a quiet digital purgatory. I was alive and breathing, just no longer there. They thought they were being slick. What they didn't know was that every critical file they'd just revoked access to, I'd already mirrored weeks ago. The timeline of known violations and misconduct confidential was now a living beast. 1 file, 23 pages, 3 appendices, 4 key exhibits. It told the story in legalese so dry it could suck the moisture out of a deposition room. Buried between the statutes and bullet points was pure napalm. Fraudulent client contracts dated 6 months before said clients legally existed. Deleted harassment complaints flagged resolved by the accused. Forecast sheets with conflicting data, one for investors, one for internal morale. A Slack message from Freaky himself, make sure the optics look investable. Substance is a 2022 problem. Everything was timestamped. Authenticated. Neutral in tone, devastating in implication. I proofed it 6 times. Had Lily double-checked the federal code references. Then I uploaded it into my Proton Mail, blind copying 147 recipients, investors, board advisors, regulatory contacts, and 2 anonymous Dropboxes linked to financial watchdogs. The subject line was simple, Arcadia Internal Report. Please review immediately legal risk exposure attached send time. Friday, 11:59 a.m. The exact moment Freaky's town hall mic would be cutting out. I ran the test automation twice, watched the countdown cycle clean, flawless. Then I backed it up onto a thumb drive, sealed it in a waterproof envelope, and left it in my glove box with a note that just said, if I get hit by a bus, send this. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room. No one made eye contact. One woman refilled her tea like I was contagious. Good. Let them pretend I was already gone. They'd clap along tomorrow as Freaky made his grand speech, smiling as he spoke of new visions and legacy cleanouts. They'd nod when he mentioned my exit like it was a footnote, but they'd never see what hit him. Because the thing about monsters in suits is they don't expect the quiet ones to write the eulogy. And mine was ready. Tomorrow, at exactly 11:59 a.m., I'd hand him his, wrapped in a subject line and signed with silence. They dimmed the lights like it was a Netflix special. A DJ, not a metaphor, a literal guy in a hoodie with turntables, played some overcompressed remix of Stronger by Can, while Freaky strutted onstage like he was about to sell us a pyramid scheme shaped like a rocket ship. Welcome to the quarterly All Hands Town Hall, now rebranded as Arcadia Ascends. Behind him, a screen flickered to life, mood boards, graphs shaped like mountains, a video montage of smiling interns tossing beanbags at each other while buzzwords like velocity, mindset, and growthified faded in and out like we were hallucinating inside a TED talk hosted by a cult. Then he took the mic. No notes, just pure performance. Let's talk about transformation, he said, grinning. Not just change. I'm talking metamorphosis. He paced the stage like a televangelist on Red Bull, throwing out phrases like legacy friction and unshackled synergy. He dropped the word proactive irreverence without irony. Every few minutes, he'd pause to let the applause swell from the new hires and the desperate. The veterans, what was left of us, mostly kept our heads down, trying not to make eye contact with our own obsolescence. Then he shifted gears. As part of this cultural refresh, we're saying goodbye to some outdated roles. Not people, no, just fossils of a slower age. He looked right at me, held it, like our longtime VP of compliance. And I do mean long time, he chuckled, the room tensed. Then your title ends Friday, sport, like I was a little boy he'd just beaten at ping pong like this was a game. The laughter started low, spread like a fungus, a few gasps. One forced guffaw from someone who definitely regretted it mid-exhale. I didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't smile. I looked right at him with the calm stillness of a trigger you hadn't realized was already halfway pulled. He thought he'd won, thought this was the final blow. What he didn't know was that the moment he said my name on that stage, my preloaded email was already syncing to the blast queue. I'd scripted this down to the nanosecond, so I sat there, let the laughter echo, let his grin widen, let the room tilt just enough that no one noticed the foundation had cracked. He moved on, announced a new VP of Culture Innovation who once ran a dog walking app, talked about ditching quarterly reviews in favor of something called emotional KPI tracking. People clapped. I didn't. I watched the clock tick closer to 11:59. This wasn't my funeral. It was his sermon, and he was preaching from a pulpit made of dynamite. At exactly 11:59 a.m., his mic cut out mid-word, and that's why compliance is bet silence. The room froze like God had hit pause. Freaky tapped the mic twice, then shrugged like it was no big deal. But by the time he reached for the backup headset, it was already too late. My email had launched. Subject line, Arcadia Internal Report. Please review immediately legal risk exposure attached to 147 blind copied recipients. Each one high enough to trigger litigation, liquidation, or both. Boxes across 5 time zones pinged in sync. Phones buzzed. Laptops dinged. One guy in the front row stared at his screen like it had just shown him the face of God, and God was holding an SEC subpoena. I stood up, quietly, smoothly, walked down the aisle like a woman leaving a church right before the fire starts. No one stopped me. No one even looked at me because they were already reading. Behind me, I heard a murmur, low, then building. It swept through the room like a wind just before the roof rips off. A VP muttered, "What the hell is this?" Someone gasped. Freaky, oblivious, kept talking into his dead mic for another 20 seconds before noticing no one was listening anymore. I didn't bother glancing back. Didn't need to. By the time I stepped into the hallway, phones were vibrating off tables. A junior staffer sprinted toward the elevators holding his laptop like it was radioactive. By the time I reached the parking garage, the company's Slack had 130 new threads with titles like Urgent Legal and Please Advisory, Arcadia Report. By the time I pulled out of the lot, a notification popped on my phone from a blocked number. We need to talk. Immediately, I turned it face down, drove in silence. No music, no tears, just asphalt and sunlight. The quiet hum of a world beginning to unravel. He wanted spectacle. I gave him substance. He wanted applause. I gave him an audit. His town hall ended with a standing ovation of blinking notifications. My exit, a data-laced missile launched in silence, landing with the kind of precision that makes headlines. No raised voice, no messy scene, just send, and everything else crumbling right on cue. By 3:17 p.m., Freaky CEO was locked out of the system. No Slack, no email. His company badge deactivated so fast he couldn't even use it to get back into the building after lunch. Someone saw him banging on the side door like a sweaty DoorDash driver, still wearing his stupid skull sneakers, and confusion like it was a fashion statement. The board called an emergency meeting at 4:02 p.m. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Chloe texted me a single emoji from inside. Fire. The stock froze before market close. Phones at Investor Relations went full DEFCON. A reporter at Finance Breaker leaked an excerpt from my memo under the headline, Arcadia's House of Cards? New evidence suggests systemic fraud at executive level. The article dropped at 6:11 p.m. By 6:13, 2 institutional funds had publicly pulled out. By 6:29, Arcadia's valuation lost $78 million. I was sitting in my apartment with a glass of overpriced Pinot Noir and a blanket the dog kept stealing, watching the news like a casual observer of my own nuclear fallout. My phone buzzed so hard it nearly danced off the table. A voicemail from a Washington-based lawyer who said, in a tone drier than toast, "We should talk whistleblower immunity." A blocked number with a message that just read, "You planned this." Chloe again, board scrambling. 2 resignations already. You magnificent bastard. Then a name I hadn't heard in months lit up my caller ID. My old mentor, Craig, didn't answer, didn't even let it ring out. I just stared at it until the screen faded back to black. I didn't do this to be noble. I did it because I was tired of watching smug men monetize rot while women were told to smile wider and sit quieter. Because I was tired of papering over fire with policy memos. Because someone needed to burn it down. I didn't go back to the office, ever. But I heard from a friend in facilities that they cleared my desk like I was radioactive, gloves, boxes, a consultant from HR who refused to touch my keyboard. What they didn't notice was the note. Tucked in the back of my bottom drawer, behind a copy of the 2021 Code of Ethics, folded neat as origami. A single line. Sharp ink on cheap printer paper, sport. You should have read the room. No signature. No flourish, just that. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's better emailed, with receipts. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.